Ever get that feeling, that feeling like you're always like one step behind in a conversation,
Yeah.
like trying to figure out like what's the subtext?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the hidden message here? Well, we're about to decode some seriously sneaky communication patterns.
Yes.
We're talking manipulation tactics used by individuals with narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah.
And riding shotgun with us today to help break it all down is expert speaker.
Thanks for having me. These tactics, they can be pretty insidious. So,
Buckle up, everybody.
yeah.
So our deep dive today is this guide. It's packed with intel on not just spotting these tactics, right?
Right.
But more importantly, strategies to protect yourself.
Exactly.
Let's be clear, though, before we go any further, we're not throwing around diagnoses here, right?
Right. This isn't about labeling anyone.
No.
It's about recognizing patterns of behavior that can be incredibly damaging in relationships.
Okay.
And this guide in particular, it zeroes in on individuals with narcissistic tendencies who often have this really fragile sense of self, and they'll resort to manipulation to shield that self-image.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's get into some of these tactics. And I
Yeah.
think it's interesting that this guide uses the word tactics, right?
Yeah.
It really kind of underscores the calculated nature of this.
Exactly. This isn't accidental. These aren't random acts. These are, deliberate strategies designed to control, manipulate, gain power in a relationship. And they can be incredibly effective because they often exploit our basic human needs. Our need for love, connection, validation.
Oh, absolutely.
They really hook into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at some of these strategies, as this guide calls them.
Okay.
And I think it would be helpful to kind of group them to really understand the different ways that they can show up. So the first group I'm seeing here, let's call it distorting reality.
Yes. Yeah. These are the tactics that really mess with your perception, making you doubt yourself, doubt your reality.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the first one that falls under distorting reality is gaslighting.
Yeah. And I feel like that term gets thrown around a lot.
It does.
What does it actually look like in action?
So imagine this. You try to address a concern with your partner, maybe about something that they said, and they flat out deny that it ever happened. And then they might even accuse you of being crazy or imagining things.
You're making that up.
Yes. And the goal here is to make you question your own memory, your sanity, until you start doubting yourself.
It's like that feeling when you swear you left your phone on the table and someone's like, no, it wasn't there. And you're like, but I know. But then you start to second guess yourself.
Exactly. And what makes it so effective is that it preys on this really deep-seated need to trust our perception of reality.
Right.
And over time, this constant undermining can really chip away at your self-confidence and make you question your judgment in other areas of your life as well.
It's like they're slowly rewiring your reality.
In a way, yes. And that's why gaslighting is so insidious and damaging. So what's another tactic that falls under this distorting reality umbrella?
Smear campaigns.
Ooh.
This is where things can get really messy really fast.
Okay. So how does a smear campaign play out?
It's all about preemptively discrediting you, often before you even know what's happening.
Wow.
So they might spread rumors about you, exaggerate your flaws, twist events to make themselves look like the victim, and you, the villain.
So they're essentially waging a campaign to ruin your reputation.
Exactly. And it's even more effective because they often do this through subtle means. Gossip, veiled comments,
Okay.
making it hard to pinpoint and even harder to defend yourself against.
Right?
It leaves you feeling really isolated, alone, like you're fighting a battle with no army.
Wow. That's like they're playing a strategic game of chess and you're just trying to figure out the rules. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got gaslighting and smear campaigns under this distorting reality. What else?
Projection. This one's a classic defense mechanism, and it can be so frustrating to deal with.
Okay.
Basically, they accuse you of the very things that they're guilty of themselves.
Oh, so it's like looking in a mirror.
Yes.
But instead of acknowledging the reflection, they're seeing you.
Precisely. They take their own insecurities, their flaws, their negative qualities, and they project them onto you.
Wow.
It's a way to avoid taking responsibility for their own baggage while simultaneously making you feel bad. It's a double whammy.
And I imagine it can make you feel like you're constantly on the defensive,
Absolutely.
trying to prove yourself.
And that's exactly the position they want to keep you in.
Oh, wow.
Off balance, questioning yourself, and ultimately more susceptible to their manipulation.
Okay, so we've uncovered these tactics that distort reality: gaslighting, smear campaigns, and projection. Let's move on to another category of these manipulation tactics, those aimed at controlling the narrative and your emotions. Expert speaker, what's first on the list?
Triangulation. It's a strategy that thrives on creating insecurity and doubt. Picture this. You're trying to have a serious conversation with your partner, but they constantly bring up an ex, a coworker, even a family member.
Right.
Almost like they're holding this other person over your head.
Interesting.
The goal here is to make you feel threatened, jealous, constantly vying for their attention.
So it's not just about bringing up this other person.
Yeah.
It's about strategically using them as leverage.
Exactly. They're essentially weaponizing this third party to keep you off balance, questioning your worth, and ultimately more dependent on them for validation.
It's almost like manufactured drama. It's
Yeah.
just designed to keep you distracted and insecure.
You hit the nail on the head. It's all about control.
Speaking of control, how about we talk about love bombing? This one sounds almost pleasant on the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't let the name fool you. It's manipulation, but disguised as affection.
Yeah.
So imagine this. You express a concern or you try to create some distance,
Right.
and suddenly you are showered with excessive compliments, gifts, grand promises. It's like they flipped a switch, and you're swept up in this whirlwind of attention.
I can see how that would be so disarming. What's the catch?
The catch is that it's not genuine. It's a calculated tactic to regain control. They're trying to distract you from the issue at hand, to make you question your instincts, to reinforce the idea that they're the only ones who can make you feel this good.
So it's less about genuine affection and more about regaining the upper hand.
Exactly. It's a roller coaster of emotions.
Right.
And it can be incredibly confusing for the person on the receiving end.
And I'm guessing that once they feel like they've, reeled you back in, the love bombing stops and then the old patterns reemerge.
Often, yes. It's a cyclical pattern of manipulation.
And sometimes that cycle includes a tactic called hoovering. What exactly is that?
Think of it like this.
Okay.
You've finally mustered the strength to walk away from this toxic relationship.
Yeah.
You're starting to rebuild your life, and then out of nowhere, they resurface.
Oh, no.
They might apologize profusely, promise to change, maybe even resort to threats or guilt trips. Oh, wow.
All in an attempt to suck you back into the dysfunction.
So it's like they can't stand the thought of losing their grip on you.
Exactly. It's all about regaining that sense of control, even if it's through manipulation and coercion.
It sounds like breaking free from this type of dynamic takes immense strength and resilience.
Absolutely. And even when you are able to create some distance, these individuals, they might resort to playing the victim.
Oh, interesting. What does that look like in practice?
So imagine you try to establish a boundary or you confront them about their behavior, and suddenly they're the ones who are hurt and misunderstood.
Oh, wow.
They might exaggerate their own struggles, downplay their role in any conflicts, even invent scenarios where they're the ones being wronged.
So it's another way to deflect responsibility and avoid accountability.
You nailed it. It's a masterclass in emotional manipulation, and it can be incredibly effective at eliciting sympathy and making you feel guilty for even raising concerns. So it's almost like they have this arsenal of tactics to keep you feeling off balance and, under their control. But the Dan Guide isn't just about recognizing these manipulative behaviors, right?
Yeah.
It's about equipping us with tools to protect ourselves. So, expert speaker, where do we even begin?
It starts with awareness, understanding these tactics like we've been talking about, and then shifting that focus to what you can control,
Right.
your own actions, your reactions. And this guide, it really lays out a roadmap for doing just that with practical strategies that can help you navigate these challenging dynamics. And
Right.
it all starts with setting clear boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah.
Yeah.
Boundaries are essential in any relationship.
Yeah.
But I imagine, especially when you're dealing with someone who exhibits these, manipulative tendencies, what are some practical ways to set those boundaries, especially when someone is so skilled at pushing back?
Yeah. It's about identifying your non-negotiables.
Okay.
Those things that you're absolutely not willing to tolerate, and then communicating those limits calmly but firmly. Don't be afraid to say no and stick to your guns. Even if they guilt trip, they sulk, they try to bargain their way out.
It's like holding up a stop sign. Like there's no negotiating.
Exactly.
It's just, this is the boundary.
This is it.
Okay. But what about when someone simply refuses to respect those boundaries? I mean, these are folks who, it seems like, they thrive on pushing buttons.
That's where the gray rock method comes in.
Ooh, okay.
This one's a game changer.
Right.
It's all about becoming emotionally unresponsive. like a gray rock.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work in practice?
Think short, factual answers.
Yeah.
Zero emotional energy. You're essentially starving them of the drama, the reactions, the fuel they need to keep that manipulation going.
So you're not giving them anything to work with. They want a reaction. They want to see you sweat a little bit, but you're just neutral.
Precisely. Over time, they'll likely lose interest if they're not getting that desired response.
Right.
It's about protecting your energy, your sanity. That makes so much sense. It's like you're taking back your power by refusing to play their game. What about those moments where you do kind of get sucked in, you get into an argument? What then?
This guide emphasizes the power of logic.
Okay.
You know, narcissists, they thrive on those emotional responses.
Right.
So by sticking to the facts, using calm, neutral language, you're essentially disarming them. It's much harder to argue with logic than it is to dismiss emotion.
Right. So instead of saying, you always do this, it's more like, well, when this happened, I felt this way.
Exactly.
Yeah, it takes the emotional charge out of it.
Yes. And whenever possible, set time limits on those interactions.
Oh, that's a good one.
Especially in those early stages when you're trying to, establish some distance. Whether it's a phone call or a visit, you stick to that predetermined time frame, even if they try to extend it.
About setting those clear boundaries like we talked about.
And sticking to them.
Okay. And what about those situations where you can't avoid interaction altogether? Like maybe it's a coworker or a family member. What do you do then?
That's where building that support system is absolutely crucial.
Okay.
It's so important to have those trusted individuals in your life that you can confide in, who can offer validation and perspective.
Because it's easy to start doubting yourself, especially when someone is so skilled at, distorting reality.
Absolutely. Having that outside perspective can really help you stay grounded and remind you that you're not alone.
Right.
You're not crazy.
And finally, let's talk about that last stage, walking away. You've tried everything, you've set boundaries, you've used logic, but the patterns persist. What happens then?
Yeah. Walking away from any toxic relationship is difficult, but it can be even more challenging when you're dealing with someone who exhibits these narcissistic tendencies.
This guide mentions something called a narcissistic collapse. What exactly is that? So it's this intense emotional tailspin that can happen when a narcissist's sense of self is threatened. Imagine their carefully constructed world, their self-image, suddenly crumbling.
Wow.
It can manifest as rage, depression, even attempts to regain control through, even more intense manipulation.
So even when you're walking away, there's a potential for things to escalate.
It's possible, and that's why prioritizing your own safety and well-being is absolutely paramount. It's not your responsibility to fix them or to manage their emotions.
So what's the most important takeaway for our listeners today?
Knowledge is power. By understanding these tactics, you can start to recognize the patterns, protect yourself, and make healthier choices for your own well-being.
You deserve to be in relationships that are built on respect, trust, and genuine care. If something feels off, trust your gut. You're not imagining it. Expert speaker, always a pleasure picking your brain.
Always great to be here.
Until next time, deep divers, stay curious.